Thank you. Huma, I've read your post. Can you vocalize it? Can you vocalize your post? It's an announcement also. Rotarian Huma.
Yeah, members are encouraged to put their videos on so we are familiar with who's talking and who our fellow members of the conference are. Thank you.
Thank you, Huma. Anybody else with an announcement? In the absence of none, let me invite Rotarian Irina, our programs officer, to introduce our guest speaker so that we can get into business. Vice President Irina.
Sorry, can you give me a minute? The file has refused to open. We are just getting a new one. Maybe the people who've joined can introduce themselves.
Sure. I can see Seko. Seko, you can put some voice tests. Stako Seko. This name requires a manual.
Hi, President Gideon. That's it was my PA, so he set up the account. It's Dr. Beatrice. So anytime you see that long name, is actually my account. My apologies.
No. We now know your other names.
I wish. So I'm just going to. I'm on two different devices, so I'm going to switch one off. I was having some trouble before, so let me do that.
Okay. Professor Jared, say hi to the rest, and then Mumbi, as we wait for Irina to put her act together. Professor Jared, say hi to the meeting. Okay, Margareta, did you say hi to anybody here? Margareta, unmute and say hi.
Yes, I am saying hi. Oh, I got a call.
Asante. Let me hope we can hold you here for long so that you can give the vote of thanks.
Yes.
Asante, Daktari. Who else am I? Mumbi, say hi to the meeting. Mumbi, the beautician, Rotarian. You can unmute. Okay, we seem like we're all over. Anybody else I'm forgetting to give an opportunity to voice test? Irina, if you're ready, we are good to go.
I just want to say hello to everyone.
Sorry?
I just wanted to say hello to everybody. This is Lucas, Dr. Lucas Nibero. Just wanted to say hello to everybody, and I'm very grateful that I was invited for the meeting again today. So thank you, Gideon, and thank you for the Rotary Club of Nairobi.
Yes, welcome back home. I think let me mention that Lucas is a past president of the Rotary Club of Nairobi Central. Went to the US for a long time. He's back, and would be more than glad to have him as a member of our club. President Kimeto, where does your club meet?
As of now, we do it online, but we'll soon do physical ones in Kitangala, a place called Trade Center.
Clinton, you can say hi to the meeting.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. How are you?
I'm okay. Karibu sana.
Okay, thank you very much for welcoming me. Thank you, and thank you for this. Thank you.
Asante, I'm told you're about to construct your palace, so you're in the right place.
Yeah, we call it palace. Thank you.
Asante, asante. Irina, we are 1 minute away to 1 o'clock.
Okay.
Or what you'll do is raise your hand. Once you need, just raise your hand so that we can so that we don't put you under pressure.
Hello?
Are you good to go?
Yeah, I think we'll just make a do with what I have offhand. So, because the file has refused to open and we can't get an alternative. So
Okay.
Marylyn is one of our Rotarians. She used to be a Rotaractor, the Rotary Club of Nairobi Central. She was a secretary there, a very dedicated Rotarian and a Rotaractor back then. We chose her to give a job talk because, as we know, we've had very many issues with the building and construction industry. She's very well versed. She served in the Association of the Architects. She'll be able to give us more details about that. From a personal knowledge of her, I know she's one of the best in the industry, and she's also worked under some of the best in the industry. So, dear Rotarians, join me in welcoming Rotarian Marylyn. Thank you.
Madam Marylyn, please proceed. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Irina, for that introduction. Just like Irina, I'm having a bit of technical challenges, but we will make do with what that we have. I had logged onto my computer, but now it has refused to cooperate, so I am using my phone, but it will not stop me from making this presentation today. So I'll go right into it. And I'll start by, I'd like to share my screen. Here we go. And as I work on sharing my screen, just the things that come to mind when you think about an architect, you can visualize what you think about when you say the word architect and what comes to mind. I'm sure some of it is the skyscrapers in town, big buildings, or even our neighborhoods where we live, such as the gated communities that we have. Go. Okay. Please let me know once you're able to see my screen. Are you able to see it?
Yeah, we can see it now. Thank you.
All right, and I hope it is in the correct orientation.
It is.
Okay.
It is. Go ahead.
Okay, thanks a lot. So as I was saying, when you think about an architect, sometimes these are the things that come to mind, the buildings that we have. Right. Is it moving? Are the slides moving, President?
They are rotating.
They're rotating. Okay, there you go. All right, so this is some of the things that come to mind when you hear the term architect. Some of these, which is a local project. This is Crystal Rivers in Mavoko, or even this, because this is what we originally had as our own traditional architecture. But then I want to challenge your perception of who an architect is and just tell you that before I can be an architect, I have to be many things there, that I have to wear many hats. I have to be a diplomat, I have to be an advisor, I have to be a counselor, an environmentalist, an activist, and even a sociologist. And this is because I have to interpret your needs and your aspirations in a way that gives you a wholesome, a useful, and a good design. So besides understanding what you would like me to provide for in terms of space, I need to understand how you live, I need to understand how you work, I need to understand how you think so that your motivations and your aspirations are clear to me, which then enables me to provide you a space that serves those aspirations and those motivations, a space that works the way you work if it is in your business. So I need to understand your workflows, how your business is done, how you make your money, what are the areas that you need to be made more efficient, what are the areas that you need to save money on. So just basically understanding everything that goes into your business and into your life. So what exactly do I do on a day-to-day basis as an architect? So I do a bit of politics, and I like to tell people and the students that I teach that architecture, sometimes you have to be a politician because a lot of policy is involved in how our buildings are actualized, in how our societies are put together. So we need to advocate right from where the laws are being made and where the policies are being put into place. So in this capacity, I am the Honorary Secretary at the Architectural Association of Kenya. So this involves just managing the image of the association, managing the members, creating value for them, and communications. But at the association, what we do is that we vocalize and we highlight the issues that are affecting our members and the way that they provide the service to the general public and to their clients. On a day-to-day basis as well, I can be found on site. So if there are buildings that have gone to site, if there's work that is having ongoing construction, then I will be found on site. And what does an architect do on site? On site, your architect manages the construction and ensures that it is being done according to the drawings that they had prepared for you. They also manage the team. So when you're putting up a building, you normally have a building team. So this involves the professionals, the consultants, you will have engineers, you will have quantity surveyors, you will have the architect, you will have maybe a construction manager. So your architect is the person that will manage everybody for the reason that they originated the plan, they originated your vision, they translated it into a building. So they are best placed to manage the execution of this project. They understand your vision, they understand your budget, they understand all the constraints on the site. They have also been involved in taking your drawings through the various approvals. So they understand what is required in law and how it should be executed and put in place. The other place or the other thing that you do day-to-day as an architect is that you will require to be able to fit into different cultures. Like I said before, you must understand the person that you're designing for. So you'll see me there in Somalia wearing, how the ladies in Somalia wear, because you must fit into the context. You must be able to relate to the culture. When you have a project in a certain locality, then you should be able to fit in. You should be able to deliver without unnecessarily standing out here. So when you understand a culture, when you're able to incorporate it into yourself, then you're able to provide for it. The other thing that I do on a day-to-day basis and that other architects do is to teach architecture, because where will the architects of tomorrow come from? How will we inform the design that is evolving within our market? So I thought that to give back, teaching would be a good place to go so that I am able to have an input to the quality of architects that come out into the market. I'm able to, they say teachers never grow old. You keep abreast of technology, of the changes. You're constantly refreshing yourself in your quest to educate others. So that's one other thing that I do. I teach at Jomo Kenyatta, and then I also teach at Kenyatta University, where they both have architecture programs. So why did I choose architecture? Why did I become an architect? I think for me, I have a love for creating, and arc, as we call it, short form architecture, is both a science and an art. So it allows you to create, but at the same time, solve problems scientifically with data and with methods that have been proven. So it presents me with a constant challenge, and it never gets boring, because no two clients are the same, no two sites are the same, no 2 days are the same when you're executing or when you're designing a project. So some of the projects that I have involved in range from residential to amusement parks, to office building, to a referral hospital, just a wide range of projects. And that's why I say that an architect has to wear many hats, because you need to understand almost how everything works. I remember having to design a morgue. So at that point, I had never actually been inside the morgue, but then I had to go in and find out how everything works, because to be able to provide for a space, you need to understand just the process of what goes on in that space. What is the most rewarding thing about being an architect? For me, I would say is the constant development, yeah? That there is constant change. Materials are constantly changing. When perhaps our parents were children, they constructed using earth. Now we are constructing with masonry. In the future, who knows what we're going to be constructing with. Technology is constantly changing. So the systems that we can put into buildings are different. You constantly need to refresh yourself. Laws and policies are constantly changing. So it's always a fresh situation, but that can also be informed by what you have done previously. So that is the most exciting thing about architecture, that it's constantly evolving, it's constantly changing, and it allows you that opportunity to keep refreshing yourself. And maybe what is difficult, let me deal about what is difficult about architecture. In my context, I would say that in execution, it is the corruption that is in our society, or the lack of adherence to laws and to systems and to just doing things as they should be. Because we shouldn't have, in a country like Kenya, we shouldn't have incidences of building collapse where we have institutions such as KEBS that are checking materials, where we have approval systems, where the counties are checking whether the drawings are correct. We have professionals in the market. Those professionals have such professional exams. We have contractors that are accredited by MCA, which is then supposed to enforce how things are done. So how, after all these checks and balances, do we still have buildings that are collapsing? So for me, that would be the most difficult thing about working particularly in Kenya. But generally, as an architect, I think the difficulty sometimes is in the long hours that you need to put in order to just deliver to your client. The amount of research that is required to be able to understand a brief and to actualize it. A little bit about what I think architecture will look like as we're going into the future. You'll see there a skating rink, which was originally a church. So we have a lot of spaces that are going to change their use going into the future. So there'll be a lot more of retrofitting rather than building new buildings, because we have spaces that are not in use or whose use can be changed. And also the needs that we have are constantly evolving. So we might have been frequenting church in the past, and there might have been large numbers, but maybe as people change how they worship, or as people change their culture, some of these spaces fall into disuse. So because they cannot just be demolished, their use will need to change. There'll be factories that are retrofitted. In the West, some are retrofitted and made into residential areas or into offices. Then the other thing I see happening is that we will have multiple use of the spaces that we have. Space will become a premium. It will come at a premium. So you will find that like that lady there, your bedroom is your office, is your kitchen, is your everything. The other thing is just we will end up having to share our infrastructure, like that picture of housing in Hong Kong. The days of having our own compounds or having our own offices might be coming to an end. So we'll have to share infrastructure, we'll have to share spaces. So then we need to think through how we can do this efficiently and in a way that doesn't harm the earth. As you can see there, the next thing about architecture is climate change and how this is going to influence how much we can build or how we can build. And then the final thing is about technology, that we will have to embrace it, integrate it into our buildings. At KU, I teach building management systems, which is automation of buildings and just integration into our systems. But there are so many things we're currently doing manually in our buildings and in our houses that can easily be automated for efficiency to save the energy that we use and the resources that we use, which then ties again to climate change and conserving our earth. So how architecture and Rotary just interfaces and where they would meet. And I think that just like Rotary and the things that we do as Rotarians to serve other people, that architecture can be a force for good. There you'll see just a picture of a maternity village, which is in Rwanda, that has changed the lives of the women in that village, that they can go and wait for their time of delivery there, receive the services that they need in a space that is comfortable and conducive and appropriate for where they are. Then on the right, you will see a kindergarten in South Africa that was constructed with the help of the community and materials that were just recycled. So this kindergarten has provided an education opportunity for the children. It provided an opportunity for the community to participate and therefore own the building and in the construction. So architecture is a force for good. My mantra as I end, I think, would be as an architect, it's about not just being a good architect, but an architect who is also good, an architect who is able to give back to the earth, and an architect who is able to adhere to the standards and to the qualities that are required of them. It was as brief as that, and I'd like to maybe welcome your comments and your reactions.
Asante, I wish you could see us clapping. I think that was a great presentation. What I would advise you do, architect Mumbua, architect and Rotarian Mumbua, is take a piece of paper and pen. We will fill questions at once, and you will respond to them at once also.
Okay.
The floor is open for questions. Go ahead.
So that was a very exciting, I need to be on video to ask the question. That was very exciting, a very exciting presentation. I really appreciate that. What I'm a little, when you talk about the earth, when we talk about what's going on everywhere, there's a lot of material repurposing. How is that being championed in Kenya, for example, where we have a lot of material that can be repurposed and to form construction materials that can be both durable, earth-friendly, and not cheap, but reasonably priced? Thank you.
Thank you. Next.
May I ask a question? Rotarian Justice?
Yes, go ahead.
Thank you for your talk. I'm sorry I wasn't there at the beginning, but the bit that I caught there, 1 or 2 points you gave, you made 1 or 2 points, and I want to pursue one. You said in a country like Kenya, we should not have buildings collapsing. I didn't quite understand your reasons why are buildings collapsing? I didn't quite understand how you explained it. Maybe if you can go over that again. And then you again talked about you are designing a morgue or something and you had never seen one and then you had to go into one. How often does this happen, that when you want to design something, then you have to go and look at an existing one first? Or was this just something very special? Thank you. Thank you.
Maybe I'll jump in. I've just mentioned my experience of constructing in Nairobi, which I have to get approvals from the governing county government. And here in the village, what I do is just show Azay that actually not show, tell them I want to construct and they'll show me where to construct. So we have, we are at variance in how to engage, let me call them stakeholders for now, when it comes to construction, particularly depending on where you're constructing. Then you mentioned something like China, Hong Kong. I happened to have visited Hong Kong some 15 years ago and learned that it was only 60 years older than Nairobi. But you could see from the planning of the city, the skyscrapers, of course, there was no gated communities. You'd find a minister of an external government, of the island government, staying in a high-rise building. You will not see traffic jams are absent in Hong Kong, and yet it's only 60 years older than we are. It's about 10 population size. I think it was about 2-3 million at the time, and compare it to the sister city called Nairobi, and you see one organization and another one simply in chaos. Probably from an architectural point of view, you would guide us on how we can achieve some of the things that are a bit obvious in Hong Kong. Thank you. Somebody else has raised their hand. Let me see who these are. Justin, go ahead, and then Dr. Beatrice will come in.
Thank you. I also, President Gideon, want to commend our speaker on innovation and the innovation she's put into the construction industry and into architecture. I was drawn to the picture, the diagram and photograph actually of a maternity waiting home in Rwanda. And maternal and child care, health is one of the areas where I have some expertise. I am asking, does she engage with the professional bodies that provide those services, or is she planning to do so when she constructs? Because it's beautiful to have this easy to access facility, but sometimes we know obstetric emergencies will and may occur. And therefore, how are the professional bodies, regulatory authorities, and those that work within the sector engaged in her architectural work? Thank you.
Wonderful. Dr. Beatrice, and then we will go to Dr. Margareta.
I hope you can hear me. I'm in a slightly noisy place. We're busy writing clinical guidelines here. Is it clear?
Go ahead.
Oh, okay, great. First of all, congratulations. I shall now claim our speaker as my cousin because she is, but really wanting to commend the work that she has put into both her career and the presentation. My question is really about the capacity to change construction work, especially residential, from being a nightmare situation for many who are left without options when they come to dealing with contractors. I think kazi ya mjengo can be a bit of a scary concept because personally put me off doing things like that. that I enjoy from a creative perspective because of the tedium of the different people that you have to deal with. I look at examples like the German, I think it's pronounced Hofhaus, which is so simply done and takes technology and creativity to another level. And I wonder whether we are on the way in Kenya or even in the region to making construction less painful, more creative, and more suited to our environment. And how do you see this playing out in terms of the different firms that we have and regulations? I know that's a big question, but basically, are we able to see ourselves getting much simpler and suited for purpose so that it's not a very difficult and painful process, especially for the one who's forking out for the construction work? Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Margareta?
Yes, I wanted to extend a wonderful vote of thanks for our speaker, because I think Justice Joyce missed the beginning. And in those moments, I thought she laid out beautifully the many roles that an architect plays and how she really takes it very seriously to get to know her clients, to understand exactly what they want, and to merge her own perspective with theirs. I was interested in her noting that one of the things that she does is go on site and be responsible for the management of the performance of construction. I would ask what role contractors play and how she has dealt with contractors. I thought it was also important for you to bring out the role of politics and corruption, which I think is an answer to what Justice Joyce was asking about, because you were saying that in your role within your organization of architects, you play an advocacy role regarding policy and practices. So I think that's something you could elaborate on. And I also am grateful that you're teaching, because you feel that you must give back, and you want to make sure that young up-and-coming architects are also aware of the responsibility to keep learning and to refresh their knowledge. I was struck that you never made any mention of gender, that you never observed that you are probably one of among X number of women who are architects in our society today. I wonder if you are 50-50 in the architectural world of Kenya, or whether you are a minority. But in any case, clearly gender has not held you back. And I'm very grateful that you were able to speak to us today about the responsibilities of architecture and architects. And I really admire all the work that you've already done. So please continue.
Asante. Before we get to Manu, I think Huma go first, and then Manu will come later.
Okay. Rotarian Mumbua, my question would be on the choice of material, especially in dealing with affordable housing. And I think it's been asked in a previous question, why do we have options, especially like in Africa, to use locally available material like cob and mud? Because like iconic architectures are still standing that were done in previous years, like the Hikma complex, the Kasubi tombs were made by locally available material. And this would be one of the things that pushes the prices of property up. Like, is there an option, and why do architects not advise on locally available material as an option? Thank you.
Thank you. Manu, and then Dr. Gidanga.
Chair, recently I was looking at some of our steel prefabricated buildings for school. And I was very interested to see that they got a 1 classroom, and then they got a 4 classroom for the secondary school with a staff room and a principal's room, and then 8 classrooms for the primary school and a staff room plus the principal's room. And I was very surprised that this all can be erected within 4 months' time. It must have a plinth of about 1.5 meters of stone, and after that the building comes. So just asking my my engineer that what kind of inside fitting that you do so that the heat does not percolate into the building, and said that we have got certain types of insulation which do it. And I was very surprised that if we can build this in about 6 weeks or 8 weeks or 12 weeks, that is what is required in many, many places. Right now, there are many, many schools because we moved from everybody to go into the secondary schools, and secondary schools don't have the space. So these 4 rooms will make immediately a space for 160 children. And there you don't have to have a teacher's room or staff room because you already have a school. So I think that there is a possibility of increasing our possibility, because to do any building work is a very costly process. And so that's why we thought that this prefabricated might be an answer as soon as possible. Now, when you go to United States, everything is prefabricated, bang, bang, they come along, and in 6 weeks' time or 8 weeks' time, your house is ready. So I think that but no one, as a matter of fact, here, they would not even agree to a prefab unless we get a license to do it. It will be very difficult. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Manu. Dr. Gidanga?
Thank you very much, President Gideon and fellow members. I'm sitting in with Winnie, our member. She's just popped in as the meeting was starting. I may have missed some bit of the presentation, but I wanted our very good speaker to basically address just a few issues that I may have that I know would relate to even town planning. And I know that past President Manu has alluded to some of those issues. It's basically the use of thermoneutral material. We know that mud houses are actually thermoneutral, some of the best houses you can ever have, right? We have no shortage of mud in the villages. Is there a way of actually having houses that are reinforced mud houses, which brings about temperature controls, whether you're talking about heat or cold, and in terms of affordability? Secondly, is the importation of designs that are basically meant for the temperate north, where you have over provision for heavy roofs because of the ice that does form in winter season. And we get the same sort of architecture imported here that adds to cost hugely. What's the role of the architect in doing some of these issues? What about using our natural lighting and collection of water in places like this that it does rain? Is there a need to redesign what we do use? We know that North America, for instance, uses a lot of wood. They have a lot of wood and forests of wood that grows quickly. We clearly are in the opposite direction here. How do we adjust our rapidly growing population, rapidly urbanizing population, and shortage of wood, even as we are trying to grow trees? What about using quarry stones? I mean, you look at some of the areas, even where the roads are being constructed, how the grounds are being destroyed. We leave big pits, dangerous places, land that may be very difficult to use. What are your thoughts about that way of using materials, natural materials like stones? Lastly is pavementing. We say that in about maybe another 30, 40 years, 50%, 60% of our population will be living in the urban areas. And one of the downsides of urbanization is that people tend to get concentrated in a small area. We have a lot of pavementing that causes what we call heat islands, very high temperatures within those areas. Building of houses in areas that are basically agriculture, building of houses close to high-speed roads and so on, partly because in many of the African culture, the closer your house is to the road, the more sophisticated you're seen to be. What's your input in this as you teach and try and influence policy? Thank you.
Vice President Praful, I think yours will be the last question so that you can respond. Thank you.
Thank you, President Gideon. But I could inform from what past President David Gitanga was saying, that I have just been informed that we had a request for insurance for a specialized construction technique called rammed earth. Basically, we've asked for details, and this particular experiment is going to start in January in Nyeri area, whereby local materials are reinforced in such a manner that it will stand up to quite a bit of atmospheric variations. Now, we ourselves are waiting to see how to insure these contracts, because the way it looks to me that if the trials are successful, then it is going to be used considerably for low-cost construction for various types of buildings, including schools as well as community centers, medical clinics, and also residential. Therefore, if the things that go well, imported materials inclusion will be very small. I hope that, let us see what happens, because this is a new technology which is going to be tested. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Past President Praful. Mumbua, you have about 15 minutes to respond to all those questions. 15? Yes, 15 minutes. Go ahead.
Thank you very much, President Gideon, and thank you everybody for your questions. And I think one of the main themes that is coming out in the questions is about the materials that we're using in our building. So the first one that came up was about just repurposing the material that we use, or reusing the materials that we use so that we can conserve the earth. So what I have encountered in the industry currently is that there is no policy in place per se that regulates material use in terms of repurposing or recycling, but certain companies have started to put in place systems to reuse the materials that they have, to recycle the materials that they have. And this is in the efforts of being certified perhaps as green companies, or as companies that are building and working sustainably or responsibly within the built environment. So it has begun in our country. It is gaining traction. And I think one way to push it forward would be to educate first the public on just the advantages of being able to repurpose materials, and to educate them on which companies are supplying this kind of materials and why they should patronize these companies. I encountered in September a concrete company who deliver ready-mix concrete. But what they do is that if you have some concrete in your site that you're not using, they pick it up and they recycle it, and then they resupply it to other people. So that is one way that we can contribute to our green earth goals by repurposing the materials. So what we're doing within the education sector and within the association is that we are educating. Recently, we launched a green rating tool at the Association for Buildings in Kenya, which is a local tool. You might have heard of EDGE certification, which is an international tool, but we now have a Safari Green Building Index, which is a Kenyan tool for rating green buildings. And among the things that we rate is the materials that you have used, the embodied energy in those materials, how you have actualized your construction, the sort of energy input that has gone in and the efficiency of the building in its use and even up to its decommissioning. Then maybe let me just deal with materials at the same time. Again, on the question of materials, Dr. Manu asked about steel prefabricated buildings and how we can make the interiors comfortable. And there are many ways that this can be done. To begin with is that the interiors can be lined with materials, even local materials. Think about the mkeka, the mats that they make in Mombasa. That is one thing that could actually be used to line steel prefabricated buildings to make them a bit more comfortable. Another way that this can be done is the ventilation strategy. That in the design of those prefabricated buildings, there's enough fenestration, there's enough windows, what we call cross ventilation, so that the air can flow through the building from one end to another, even perhaps from the bottom of the wall and out through the top. You know how we learned that warm air rises in primary school. So those are some of the simple ventilation strategies that can be used just to make these prefabricated buildings a bit more comfortable. Then about encouraging the use of prefabricated buildings, I see two angles to this. Number one, it's about the law, and number two, it's about perception. So if I would begin with the law, I once did a container project in Kiambu County, and the county gave us a hell of a time because according to the law, steel and mabati construction, which they consider steel to be, is temporary construction. So the county says they have no basis for approving these drawings. So what we had to do was actually draft a policy and present it to the county so that they could pass it, and based on that policy, approve the scheme that we were doing. So if we can influence or inform the law, then this would be one way of encouraging prefabricated construction, which is faster and cheaper. Then it would be about changing the perception of the people and the users, because a lot of our clients, a lot of the communities that we are building for don't want to be seen to be living in a mabati or a chuma structure. They want a stone structure because it's permanent, because it gives a perception of, I think, either wealth or social standing. So it is for us to change the perception that this is a viable way of construction. It is affordable. It can be done in a lesser time, and it creates just as good a space as other construction materials would, such as masonry or even timber. Then Huma asked about the choice of materials, why we are not using our local materials. And it goes back again to perception that if I go to my ushago at home, to my rural home, and build my house in mud, they will say, but I thought she's an architect. Why is she building with mud, you know? So it's about how our communities perceive these materials. Somewhere along our history, something changed, that we knew that mud was appropriate for our climate. It was readily available. We knew how to work it. But now people think that stone is the way to go. So slowly we need to change that perception. And those are some of the things we are doing at the universities where we are teaching. We're telling our students that, look, there are materials that are available here. You don't have to import. The energy that is used to convert these materials into a building is less. The impact on the environment is less. So we need to find ways of incorporating these materials into our design, of convincing our clients to use these materials. So number one is about perception. Then the other thing is about, again, the laws and the policies that allow us to use these materials. So if our laws would be revised, for instance, the building code we're using is from 1968. This building code was borrowed or inherited from the Britons. And the materials that are specified in it are the materials that are used or were used in Britain at that time. So can we contextualize our laws, our building codes, the materials that we are prescribing that should be used? So this would be one way to encourage people to use our own local materials. And this is also tied to what Dr. Githanga asked about the use of thermal neutral materials and reinforced mud houses, that it's really about how people see it and think about it, and our role in educating them, so that if people realize that Dr. Githanga has put up his house and it is made of reinforced, let's say, earth blocks, then you serve an example to the community. If a Rotary Club of Nairobi puts up a school somewhere and we use reinforced earth blocks or adobe walling, then it serves as an example because it's a model project, it works, it serves the community, and people want to borrow from those ideas, they want to be like us, they want to learn from us. So that is one way that can encourage that. And this ties into our importation of Western design. Our role in creating authentic designs that are ours is just creating an example, because the way I think the psychology of clients or of users works is that once they have a role model or an example that they can cite, then they feel more confident having that sort of architecture. If I know that my president Gideon lives in a mud house, then I won't feel shy as a Rotarian to also live in a mud house, because I have an example. I have somebody that has paved the way for me. So that would be our role in just adopting localized, appropriate designs that are not Western designs. Then there was a question on urbanization from Dr. Githanga, and what we are doing in the teaching space and in the policy space. So what we're doing is that as an association, as the Architectural Association of Kenya, we engage the various government agencies and stakeholders, and we try to preempt. So what we do is we do our research and we create policy positions. Where there's no law, it helps because we lay the basis for the law. We also carry out public campaigns. We have a campaign called Jeo na Mjengo, where we educate the public on just matters of construction, matters of just urbanization and planning, implementation, material choices, and all the things that affect the construction industry. In the teaching space, I think for a long time we have taught things as they should be. But sometimes when our students come into the market, they encounter resistance, and maybe their implementation of what they learned in school might not be 100%, but at the back of their minds, they are aware of ways in which we can create sustainable urban communities, ways in which we can create, for example, livable, walkable development, so that we are not having sprawl, and that is one of the things we're doing. We're constantly updating what we are teaching so that it informs our future and the kind of buildings and environments that are provided. Then there was a question from Justice Aluch on buildings collapsing, why they are collapsing and why they shouldn't collapse. So perhaps what I said was that the reason our buildings are collapsing is largely because of our culture. When I say our culture, I'll put it bluntly and say corruption. That as a developer, I want to cut corners. I want not to pay for my approvals at the county, which means that the county will not have a look at my drawings. They'll not be able to tell me whether they are sufficient. Maybe I don't want to pay an architect. I think it's too much money, or an engineer, and I engage someone that is less qualified. These are some of the reasons that are causing our buildings to collapse. Another one also is the sort of materials that are in the market. Where corners have been cut, you will find that I think I am buying good material, but it might be substandard or it might be second grade. So when I use it for my construction project, it causes problems and even collapse. So these are some of the things that cause our buildings to collapse: cutting corners, refusing to subject ourselves to approvals or to scrutiny that would ensure that the buildings are above board. why I think buildings shouldn't be collapsing in a society like ours, and I mentioned it, that we have so many agencies and so many people in place to ensure that we do the right thing, and yet they still collapse. So perhaps I would ask, where was the county? Did they inspect those buildings? Do they know how many buildings are going on in their jurisdiction? For example, the National Construction Authority, did they inspect the building? Have they licensed that contractor? If not, what has been done to that contractor? The buildings that have collapsed, what repercussions have there been for the developers or the contractors that would act as a deterrent for other people, to carry out their projects in a way that may lead to a collapse? So that is why I think there shouldn't be collapses in a society like ours, where we know what we're doing, where we have professionals, we have institutions that check materials, we have a whole agency that licenses contractors. So the situation of collapse shouldn't be occurring. You asked again about the example I gave of the morgue. So it is actually the norm as an architect, if you're going to design a certain type of building that you haven't designed before, that you visit that building, and we call it case studies, so that you understand how the building works. Maybe I give another example. I designed a food processing plant once, and I needed to understand what goes on from when the meat is delivered to the time that they make the patties for the hamburgers. It's not something that you would ordinarily know unless you had an interest. So as an architect, when you receive a brief, maybe for a type of building that you haven't encountered before, it's normal practice to look at what other buildings have been done of that kind, the materials that were used, the systems that are there, the budget that was incurred, so that it can help to inform you as you design the building that you're doing. Then President Gideon asked about approval and how we can engage the stakeholders. I think number one is for the public to realize that they need to subject themselves to the building officials and building approvals. And this is not to disturb them in any way. It is just to make sure that the drawings that have been provided to you as a client are good drawings, that the people you have engaged are actually professionals that can be held to account if something goes wrong. Because if you employ somebody and they're calling themselves an architect and perhaps they're not, and something goes wrong on your project, then as a client, you have no recourse if that person was not registered, because there is nobody that they answer to. As a client, if your contractor is not registered by NCA and something goes wrong, you have no recourse except to perhaps the contract that you had. And maybe you don't have a contract because nobody advised you that you needed a contract. So it's about educating the public about what is needed in terms of what should your professionals provide for you, how should your contractor carry out the project, what sort of documentation should be in place, what sort of insurances should be in place, how should they carry out the project. So education is important, and maybe I can mention what we do at the association. I already mentioned Jeonam Jengo. We also put up an information hub because we realized that a lot of Kenyans don't know what is required of them when it comes to construction. So we collected information from the counties on what they require for you to submit to them to approve your drawings. And it can be found on our website. If you Google the Architectural Association of Kenya, there's a portal there called the Build Hub, where you can get information on what requirements there are for your building to pass through. And then there was a question from Ambassador Josephine on how we engage with policymakers when it comes to matters such as maternal health care and so on. So yes, we do engage with policymakers. And like I mentioned before, where there is a gap, we identify it and we preempt or we start the conversation. I'll give an example of mothers that are lactating or breastfeeding. In other countries and in other jurisdictions, it's common practice to provide for women rooms where they can either express breast milk so that they can continue to breastfeed their children as long as possible. In Kenya, however, that has not been the situation. So what we have done as an association is we engaged the Ministry of Health and we actually put together a competition where we created a prototype of a space and space standards that people can then adopt when they're providing this space for women in their offices. We have championed for inclusivity in design for disabled people and put together guidelines. When the pandemic hit us, we actually put together a committee that created a manual for how we can construct our schools safely, how we can space them so that we can allow for children to return to school even when there is a pandemic. We put together designs for hospitals, how we can expand the capacity of hospitals, and even using technology like Dr. Manu mentioned of prefabricated steel to quickly expand our hospitals to have the capacity. So those are some of the initiatives that we have to engage policymakers. Then Dr. Beatrice asked about how we can make construction less painful. And I think the answer to that would be through constant education, that as a client, if you know what you should expect from your professional, from your contractor, then it becomes a bit less painful, because then you can engage them from a point of knowledge. You know what they need to provide for you. You know how they need to provide it. How have we done this? Through our public campaign, which is Jeo na Mjengo. Also through social media information, we have a handle on every social media platform. Every Friday, we handle matters that are currently happening in the building industry, whether it's on policy or just occurrences like the collapse, and we answer questions from people, and thereby we make construction, more understandable. Yeah, we bring it home to people so that they're able to understand it. Then another way that we can make construction less painful is to actually allow and engage the people that are trained in it to help us with our construction. So rather than self-build, how about employing a construction manager to manage the construction for you, or an architect so that they can manage the team for you? This makes it a bit less of a nightmare. Then the National Construction Authority, I am aware, is about to roll out a major education campaign just for the public to understand what goes on in construction, what should they expect of their contractors. So these campaigns, I know, will go a long way in educating people and in creating a space where construction can begin to be less of a fight and more of a process that we enjoy in actualizing our dream project. Dr. Margareta asked about the role that a contractor plays. So the contractor is the person that builds your project. In other jurisdictions, they're called a builder. They're the person that will put the mortar together, the stone and the mortar together to actualize the project. So their role is to construct the project. On the other end, the role of the consultant is to guide the contractor in actualizing this project. So the consultants led by the architect come up with a drawing, and the contractor actualizes those drawings as guided by those consultants. And the best way to deal with contractors, Dr. Margareta asked how to deal with them, is to always have a contract that is enforceable with your contractor, that you have agreed in writing on what should be delivered on every term. If there's a disagreement, and I know Justice Aloch is in this space of ADR, then you should already have put down what dispute resolution mechanism are you going to engage, who are you going to engage, and as a client to always have your documentation in order, your documentation safely kept and always in place. Every communication that you have to be in writing, so that there are no lapses in communication. There's no lack of clarity and there's no lack of evidence for what the intent for the project was. The best way to deal with a contractor is to have all your ducks in a row. Then you talked about gender. I think at the point when I did my undergraduates, the ratio was about 1 in 10 in terms of in school, one woman, maybe in a class of 10 gentlemen. I think now the ratios in terms of those who are in school have improved. It's about 30%. So the women are about 30%. In the market, we might still be less, maybe between 15 and 20% for reasons that cause attrition even in other industries for women. Sometimes the career path doesn't allow for family life, or they choose to take other routes. So we're about 15-20% as female practitioners. Maybe I can mention in that role that we have come together, and there are several associations. There's one called Women in Real Estate. There's another called Women in the Built Environment, where we support each other, we encourage each other, and we help to create opportunities for one another. Then I saw a question in the chat that asked whether I mentor architects. Yes, I do. In fact, I was part of creating a mentorship program that we ran at the Architectural Association of Kenya. So what happens is that we pool our mentees and then we pool our mentors, and we allocate the mentees to the mentors based on different things, the outcomes that they desire and the areas that someone is practicing in or has experience in, age, gender, culture. So those are some of the things that we consider when we are pairing our mentees with their mentors. Then there was a question on, or a comment by PP Praful on the rammed earth construction. I think if your trials are successful, like I said, we need examples of projects that have succeeded. So this will be a very welcome contribution to the industry, that this material can have been demonstrated to work and can be scaled or rolled out so that people can use it for their communities and their houses, then it would be a very good example. At JKUAT, Jomo Kenyatta University of Agriculture and Technology, a lot of research has gone into these materials. There are even publications, but for one reason or another, we've not been able to scale and to just push them into the main market. So if there can be other people that champion this, I think it will push us forward as a country. I think I have covered all the questions that I was able to note down. So thank you, and over to you, President.
Thank you. Thank you. Wow, just a minute. Am I there? Yes, thank you, Madam Mumbua. I don't want to keep guys here for long. Just one announcement. We'll have a physical meeting next Thursday, depending on the unfolding situation in Ethiopia. We'll have District Governor-elect Azeb as our guest speaker. We are among the limited number of clubs that she chose to fellowship with while on her visit in Nairobi. So I'd ask all of us to turn up in great numbers. I want to invite Margareta to respond on architect Rotarian Marylyn Mumbua's presentation on our behalf. Please make it short. It's already 3 minutes after 2. And on my own part, I would want to say, Marylyn, you've done an extremely good presentation, but let Margareta respond to your presentation on our behalf. Thank you.
Yes, thank you so much. Madam Wambua, I thought your responses to all of these pressing questions was wonderful and very comprehensive, just as comprehensive as what you had to share. I thought you really laid out the role of the architect, and your thoughtful presentation about relation with your client and carrying that through, and the management straight through to the end, your teaching and the responsibility that you have. I'm really grateful for your recognition of the problems as well. The long hours, the corruption, the technology that is ever changing, but your really positive perspective on refreshing your knowledge and the knowledge of your students. And I'm grateful to hear that you have support from other women practitioners who are facing some of the same challenges you have. But I'm grateful that that has not obstructed your productivity. So thank you so much for speaking to us. You speak very, very well. And we look forward to seeing you as an active member in the club and to have you speaking to us another day. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Shubrika, your question will not be taken on today. And thank you for all the contributors. Thank you for all those who turned up. I think it has been a great fellowship. I would call on us to charge our glasses, be upstanding. And for those that don't have a glass to charge, I want to give our final toast together with the Rotary Club of Kitengela. I give you Rotary the world over. Thank you. God bless you. Have a great afternoon. See you in the event. We can meet before that time. Please, let's have a chat. Thank you. God bless.